The knock on the door came 3 times, hard and deliberate, and Sarah Mitchell knew exactly who stood on the other side before she even crossed the cramped room of her rented quarters above the general store in Prescott, Arizona territory. It was August of 1882, and the relentless summer heat had baked the town dry for weeks, turning the streets to dust and wilting what little vegetation managed to survive in this unforgiving landscape. Sarah had been trying to make ends meet ever since her father died 6 months ago, leaving her alone in a territory that showed little mercy to women without family or fortune. She had taken work where she could find it, mending clothes for the wives of miners and ranchers, baking pies to sell at the mercantile, even scrubbing floors at the saloon in the early morning hours before the drunks stumbled in. But it was never enough, and now Leonard Briggs, her landlord and owner of half the buildings on Whiskey Row, had come to collect what she owed. Sarah smoothed her worn calico dress and tucked a strand of dark auburn hair behind her ear before opening the door. Briggs stood there, a thick man with a florid face and cold eyes that assessed everything in terms of profit and loss. He wore a suit that had cost more than Sarah would earn in a year, and his gold watch chain glinted in the late afternoon sun that slanted through the hallway window. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the false pleasantry of a man who had already made up his mind about something unpleasant. "I believe we have business to discuss." "Mr. Briggs," Sarah replied, keeping her chin up even though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I know I am behind on the rent. I have been working as much as I can, and I hope to have something for you by the end of next week." Briggs stepped forward without invitation, forcing Sarah to back into her small room. He glanced around at the sparse furnishings, the narrow bed with its faded quilt, the small table where she took her meals and did her sewing, the trunk that held everything she owned in the world. His lips curled in something that was not quite a smile. "End of next week," he repeated, as though tasting the words and finding them sour. "Miss Mitchell, you are 3 months behind. 3 months. That is more than I can overlook, even for a young woman in difficult circumstances." "I understand, sir, but I am trying. My father's death left me with debts I did not know existed, and I have been working to pay those as well. If you could just give me a little more time." "Time," Briggs interrupted, "is something I cannot afford to give away for free. This is a business, Miss Mitchell, not a charity. I have taxes to pay, maintenance to cover, and other tenants who manage to meet their obligations without excuses." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, a mixture of shame and anger. "I am not making excuses, Mr. Briggs. I am explaining my situation and asking for your understanding." Briggs removed his hat and set it on her table, making himself comfortable in a way that sent a chill down Sarah's spine despite the oppressive heat. "I am a reasonable man," he said slowly, "and I am willing to make an arrangement that would benefit us both." The way he looked at her then made Sarah's stomach turn. She had heard stories about Leonard Briggs, about the young women who had found themselves in his debt, and how some of them had managed to stay in their rooms without paying a cent. She had always told herself she would rather starve in the street than compromise herself that way. But now, facing the reality of homelessness in a territory where a woman alone had few options and fewer protections, she felt the walls closing in. "I do not think I understand what kind of arrangement you mean," Sarah said carefully, though she understood perfectly well. Briggs took a step closer. "You are a pretty girl, Sarah. May I call you Sarah? You have been struggling alone for too long, and I could make your life considerably easier. A room of your own, no worries about rent, perhaps even a small allowance for pretty dresses and trinkets. All you would need to do is be kind to me, spend time with me when I ask. Surely that is not so terrible a proposition." Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I would rather sleep in the desert with the rattlesnakes than accept that kind of arrangement, Mr. Briggs. I may be poor, but I am not for sale." The false pleasantry dropped from Briggs's face like a mask, revealing the cruel calculation beneath. "Very well," he said coldly. Then I will expect full payment of what you owe by tomorrow evening. $120, Miss Mitchell. If you cannot produce it, I will have the sheriff remove you from the premises and I will sell what little you have to recoup my losses. Do I make myself clear? $120 might as well have been $120,000. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Tomorrow, that is impossible. You know I cannot possibly. Tomorrow evening, Briggs repeated, settling his hat back on his head. 6 o'clock. I will return then, and you will either have my money or you will have your belongings packed and ready to vacate. The choice, Miss Mitchell, is entirely yours. He left without another word, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway and then descending the stairs to the street below. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, her legs suddenly weak. She had known this day was coming, had felt it approaching like a summer storm building on the horizon, but the reality of it still hit her like a physical blow. She crossed to the window and looked out over Prescott's Main Street. The town had grown considerably since the capital of Arizona Territory had been moved back here from Tucson just a few years ago. Miners, ranchers, merchants, and drifters filled the streets, all of them chasing their own version of fortune in this harsh land. Down below, she could see people going about their business, oblivious to her crisis. The blacksmith hammered at his forge, sending up sparks that glowed briefly before disappearing. A wagon loaded with supplies rolled past, heading toward one of the mining camps in the surrounding hills. A group of cowboys sat on the bench outside the saloon, their spurs glinting in the sun as they laughed and passed a bottle between them. Sarah turned away from the window and sank onto her bed. She tried to calculate what she might be able to earn by tomorrow evening, but the numbers would not add up no matter how she arranged them. She had perhaps $20 saved, hidden in a small tin box under a loose floorboard. Even if she sold every possession she had, she could not make up the difference. The afternoon shadows grew longer as she sat there, trying to think of some solution, some miracle that might save her. She thought about going to the bank, but she had no collateral for a loan and no family to co-sign. She thought about asking the minister at the church for help, but the congregation was small and already stretched thin, helping those they considered more deserving. She thought about leaving town entirely, just packing what she could carry and walking away, but where would she go? How would she survive alone in the desert, or in some other town where she knew no one and had no prospects? The sun was setting when Sarah finally rose from her bed, her decision made. She would not give Leonard Briggs the satisfaction of seeing her beg, and she would not compromise her principles no matter how desperate her circumstances. She would go to him tomorrow evening with whatever money she had, and when it was not enough, she would hold her head high as she left. After that, she would figure out what came next. She had survived her father's death and the month since. She would survive this too. That evening, Sarah went down to the street to buy a piece of bread and some cheese for her supper, spending a few precious pennies from her dwindling funds. The general store was still open, and Mrs. Henderson, the shopkeeper's wife, gave her a sympathetic look as she wrapped the food in brown paper. "Hard times, dear?" the older woman asked kindly. Sarah managed a smile. "No harder than anyone else's, I suppose." "You let me know if you need anything," Mrs. Henderson said. "We women have to look out for each other in this territory." Sarah thanked her and stepped back out into the street, where the evening air had finally begun to cool. The saloons were coming to life now, piano music spilling out into the dusty road along with laughter and the clink of glasses. She was about to head back upstairs when she heard a commotion down the street. A group of men on horseback had ridden into town, and they were pulling up in front of the Long Branch Saloon. Even from a distance, Sarah could tell these were not ordinary cowhands. They sat their horses with easy confidence, their clothes dusty from long days on the trail but their gear well-maintained and expensive. One of them, a tall man on a gray gelding, swung down from his saddle with fluid grace and said something to his companions that made them laugh. Sarah was about to turn away uninterested in the comings and goings of cowboys, when the tall man looked directly at her. Even across the width of the street and the gathering dusk, she felt the impact of his gaze. He touched the brim of his hat in a polite gesture, and Sarah found herself nodding in acknowledgement before she quite realized what she was doing. Then the moment passed. The cowboy turned to join his friends entering the saloon, and Sarah hurried back to her room, troubled by the strange flutter of awareness that chance encounter had sparked. She had no time for such nonsense. Tomorrow her whole world might collapse around her, and she needed to be ready for it. Sleep came hard that night. Sarah lay in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of Prescott after dark. The music and voices from the saloons, the occasional bark of a dog, the clip-clop of horses passing by. She finally drifted off near dawn, and when she woke, the sun was already well up and the heat was building. Sarah spent the day going through her possessions, trying to determine what she might be able to sell quickly. Her mother's cameo brooch, the one thing of value she owned, would fetch something at the jeweler's shop. Her father's pocket watch, which she had kept as a memento, might bring a few dollars more. She gathered these items along with a pair of silver candlesticks and a small music box, then made her way down to the jeweler. Mr. Goldstein examined each piece carefully, his jeweler's loupe screwed into one eye as he assessed their worth. Finally, he looked up at Sarah with regret written on his weathered face. "I can give you $35 for all of it," he said. "I am sorry, Miss Mitchell. I know these things have sentimental value, but that is the best I can do." Sarah's heart sank, but she nodded. "I will take it." She left the shop with the money in her reticule, feeling as though she had sold pieces of her soul. The cameo had belonged to her mother, who had died when Sarah was only 10. The watch had been her father's most prized possession. But sentiment would not keep a roof over her head, and she had to be practical. With the $35 added to her savings, Sarah had $55 total. It was not even half of what she owed Briggs. She spent the afternoon trying to collect money owed to her for sewing work, managing to gather another $8. $63. Still far short of the $120 she needed. As the afternoon wore on toward evening, Sarah returned to her room and changed into her best dress, a simple but respectable navy blue cotton with a white collar. If she was going to face eviction, she would do it with dignity. She pinned her hair up carefully, washed her face and hands, and then sat down to wait. 6 o'clock came and went. Sarah sat by her window, watching the street below as the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and purple. At 6:15, she saw Leonard Briggs walking up the street toward the building, his purposeful stride that of a man coming to claim what he believed was his due. Sarah heard his footsteps on the stairs, then his knock on her door. She took a deep breath, picked up the small purse containing all the money she had been able to gather, and opened the door. Briggs looked her over, and something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes when he saw she was dressed to leave. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "I trust you have had time to reconsider my offer." "I have $63, Sarah said evenly. "It is all I have been able to gather. I know it is not the full amount, but if you will accept it as partial payment and give me one more month, I will find a way to pay you the rest." Briggs made a show of considering this, though Sarah could tell he had already decided. $63, he mused. "That leaves $57 still owed. I am afraid that is simply too much to overlook, Miss Mitchell. However, my previous offer still stands. Spend the evening with me, let us come to a more permanent arrangement, and we can forget all about this unpleasant business." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I have told you my answer to that proposal." Briggs's expression hardened. "Then I am afraid we are finished here. You have 1 hour to collect your belongings and vacate the premises. After that, I will have the sheriff remove you and sell your possessions to cover the debt." "You cannot sell my things," Sarah protested. "They are not worth anything close to $57. "Then you should have thought of that before you refused to pay what you owe," Briggs said coldly. 1 hour, Miss Mitchell. He turned to go, and Sarah felt panic rise in her throat. "Please," she said, hating the desperation in her voice but unable to stop it. "Please, Mr. Briggs, I have nowhere to go." Briggs paused at the top of the stairs and looked back at her. "That is not my problem. You made your choice. Now you will live with the consequences." Sarah stood in her doorway, frozen, as Briggs descended the stairs. She felt the walls of her small world closing in, suffocating her. Where would she go? What would she do? The money in her purse would not last long, certainly not long enough to find new lodgings and secure work. She would be homeless in a town where homeless women had few options, all of them grim. She was about to step back into her room to begin the hopeless task of packing when she heard a commotion in the street below. Voices were raised, and one of them was Briggs's, sharp with irritation. "This is none of your concern, sir. I suggest you move along." Sarah moved to the window and looked down. Leonard Briggs stood on the wooden sidewalk below, facing the tall cowboy Sarah had noticed the evening before. In the light of the newly lit street lamps, she could see him more clearly now. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that touched his collar and a strong, sun-weathered face. He wore work clothes, denim trousers and a chambray shirt with a leather vest and a gun belt slung low on his hips. His hat was pushed back, and even from above, Sarah could see the intensity in his eyes as he regarded Briggs. "I believe it is my concern if I choose to make it so," the cowboy said, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. It was a deep voice, calm but with an edge of steel that suggested it would be unwise to push him too far. "I could not help but overhear your conversation just now, something about a lady who is short on rent." "This is a private business matter," Briggs said stiffly. "And I will thank you to keep your nose out of it." "How much does the lady owe?" the cowboy asked, ignoring Briggs's objection. "That is none of your affair." "I am making it my affair. How much?" There was a pause during which Sarah held her breath. She could see other people on the street stopping to watch the confrontation. Briggs clearly did not like being challenged in public, but there was something about the cowboy's bearing that made him cautious. $57, Briggs finally said. "But as I said, this is between me and my tenant." The cowboy reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Sarah watched, stunned, as he counted out bills and then held them out to Briggs. "There is $60, he said. "More than enough to cover what is owed with a bit extra for the trouble. The lady's debt is settled." Briggs stared at the money as if it were a snake that might bite him. "Now wait just a minute," he said. "You cannot just—" "I can and I am," the cowboy interrupted. "The debt is settled. Do you accept payment or not?" A crowd had gathered now, and Sarah could see that public opinion was not on Briggs's side. Several people were muttering, and one of the cowboys who had ridden in with the tall man the night before called out, "Take the money, Briggs, unless you would rather explain to everyone why you are refusing good currency." Briggs's face flushed dark red, but he snatched the money from the cowboy's hand. "Fine," he spat. "The debt is paid, but Miss Mitchell had better not fall behind again or there will be no more second chances." "I do not think that will be a problem," the cowboy said mildly. "Do I have your word as a gentleman that the lady's account is settled in full?" "You have it," Briggs said through gritted teeth. He shoved the money into his pocket and stalked off down the street, his dignity in tatters. The crowd began to disperse, several people clapping the cowboy on the shoulder or nodding their approval. Sarah stood at her window, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might leap from her chest. The cowboy looked up and their eyes met. He smiled, touched the brim of his hat again in that same polite gesture, and then turned to rejoin his companions. Sarah's mind whirled. A complete stranger had just paid her debt, had just saved her from disaster, and she did not even know his name. She could not let him simply walk away. Before she quite knew what she was doing, she had grabbed her shawl and was hurrying down the stairs to the street. The evening air was cooler now, and the smell of dust and horses and cooking food from the nearby restaurants filled her senses. Sarah looked around frantically, afraid the cowboy had already disappeared into one of the saloons, but then she spotted him. He was standing with 3 other men near the hitching post, checking the cinch on his gray gelding saddle. "Sir," Sarah called out, her voice breathless from her rush down the stairs. "Sir, please wait." The cowboy turned, and up close, Sarah was struck by how handsome he was in a rugged, weathered way. His eyes were a deep brown, almost black in the lamplight, and when he looked at her, she felt that same strange flutter of awareness she had experienced the evening before. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat. His companions moved a discreet distance away, giving them space. "I cannot let you do this," Sarah said, the words tumbling out. "I cannot let you pay my debt. I do not even know you. I do not even know your name." "Cole Hartley," the cowboy said, "and there is nothing to let or not let. It is already done." "But why?" Sarah asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Cole Hartley was quiet for a moment, as if considering his answer carefully. "I passed by the window earlier," he finally said. "I heard what that man was asking of you, what he wanted in exchange for forgiveness of your debt. I have a sister back in Texas, and I would like to think that if she ever found herself in similar circumstances, someone would step up to help her without asking for anything in return. I suppose I helped you for her sake, if that makes sense." Tears prickled at Sarah's eyes, the stress and fear of the past day finally overwhelming her careful composure. "That is very kind," she managed to say, "but I cannot accept charity. I will pay you back every penny, I swear it." "All right," Cole said simply. "If it makes you feel better to think of it as a loan, then that is what it is. Pay me back when you can, and if you cannot, well, consider it a gift from one stranger to another." "I will pay you back," Sarah insisted. "I do not know how long it will take, but I will, I promise you." Cole smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face, making him look younger and less careworn. "I believe you," he said. "You have got the look of someone who keeps her promises." They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to say next. Finally, Sarah remembered her manners. "I am Sarah Mitchell," she said, extending her hand, "and I am more grateful than I can express for what you have done." Cole took her hand, his grip warm and calloused from years of ranch work. "It is a pleasure to meet you properly, Miss Mitchell." "You must let me do something to thank you," Sarah said. "I could make you dinner, or I could mend your clothes, or—" "There is something you could do," Cole interrupted gently, "if you are willing." Sarah tensed, suddenly afraid that this kindness came with strings attached after all. "What is it?" "There is a dance tonight at the community hall," Cole said. "Nothing fancy, just a gathering for the townsfolk and the ranchers from the surrounding area. I am new to Prescott, just got hired on at the 3 Bars Ranch south of here, and I do not know many people yet. It would be nice to have a partner for at least one dance if you would be willing to accompany me." Sarah stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. After everything that had just happened, this man wanted to take her to a dance. "You want me to dance with you?" she asked, certain she must have misunderstood. "If you are not otherwise engaged," Cole said. "I understand if you have other plans or if you would rather not. I just thought, after such an unpleasant evening, you might enjoy an hour or two of music and company." Sarah thought about her tiny room upstairs, thought about sitting alone with her relief and her gratitude, and her confusion about what had just transpired. Then she thought about music and laughter, and the feeling of being part of the community instead of always on the outside looking in. "I would like that very much," she heard herself say. "Thank you, Mr. Hartley." "Cole," he corrected, "and the pleasure is mine, Miss Mitchell." "Sarah," she said, smiling despite everything, "if we are going to dance together, you had better call me Sarah." The community hall was located at the end of Whiskey Row, a simple wooden structure that served as a meeting place for everything from church services to political rallies to social gatherings. By the time Sarah and Cole arrived, the dance was already well underway. Fiddle music poured out through the open windows along with the sound of laughter and stomping feet. Sarah felt suddenly self-conscious about her simple dress and worn shawl. She had not been to a social event since her father's death, had not allowed herself such frivolities when she was struggling just to survive. But Cole offered her his arm with such easy courtesy that she found herself relaxing as they entered the hall together. The interior was lit by lanterns hanging from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the assembled crowd. Miners danced with merchants' daughters, ranchers' wives chatted in groups along the walls, and children wove between the adults, playing their own games. A small group of musicians occupied one corner, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica providing lively tunes. Cole's companions from the night before were there, and they called out greetings as Cole and Sarah entered. One of them, a stocky man with red hair and a cheerful face, whistled and said, "Well, look at you, Cole, moving fast as always." "Mind your manners, Red," Cole said, but he was smiling. "Miss Mitchell, allow me to introduce my fellow cowpunchers from the 3 bars. This is Red Murphy, Jack Tillman, and Sam Begay." The 3 men tipped their hats politely. Sam Begay, Sarah noticed, had the dark hair and copper skin of a Navajo, and she wondered briefly at her ranch that would hire both white and Indian cowboys. It spoke well of the outfit, she thought, and of the men who worked there. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," Red said, "and might I say, any woman who has caught Cole's eye is someone we are mighty interested in getting to know." "I have not caught anyone's eye," Sarah said quickly, feeling her cheeks heat. "Mr. Hartley simply invited me to a dance. There is nothing more to it than that." The 3 men exchanged knowing glances, but before anyone could say anything else, the current song ended and a new one began. Cole turned to Sarah and held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked formally. Sarah placed her hand in his and he led her onto the floor. The dance was a simple waltz, one Sarah had learned as a girl, and she was relieved to find that the steps came back to her easily. Cole was a good dancer, confident but not showy, guiding her smoothly through the turns. "You dance well," Sarah said as they spun past a group of miners. "My mother insisted that her sons learn proper manners," Cole said. "She said it did not matter if we spent our days covered in dust and working cattle, we should still know how to conduct ourselves like gentlemen when the occasion called for it. She sounds like a wise woman." "She is. She runs the ranch back home now that my father has passed. She is tougher than most men I know, and twice as smart." They danced in silence for a moment, and Sarah found herself very aware of Cole's hand at her waist, of the way he smelled faintly of soap and leather and the outdoors. She had not been this close to a man since her father's death, and certainly never to one who made her pulse quicken the way Cole Hartley did. "May I ask you something?" Cole said as the music played on. "Of course." "That man, Briggs, he will not cause you further trouble, will he?" Sarah considered the question. "I do not think so, not now that the debt is paid. Leonard Briggs is many things, but he is not foolish enough to go back on his word in front of witnesses. Why do you ask?" "Because if he does bother you, I want you to let me know. Men like that who take advantage of women in difficult circumstances, they need to be checked." "That is very gallant of you," Sarah said softly, "but you have already done more than enough for me. I could not ask you to involve yourself further in my affairs." "You are not asking, I am offering." Cole's eyes were serious as he looked down at her. "I know we just met, Sarah, but I would consider it a personal favor if you would come to me if you need help." Sarah did not know what to say to that. She had been alone for so long, relying only on herself, that the idea of having someone to turn to felt foreign and strangely frightening. But it also felt like a warmth spreading through her chest, like the first thaw after a long winter. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means more to me than you might realize." The waltz ended, and the musicians launched immediately into a livelier tune, a reel that had the younger dancers whooping with excitement. Cole and Sarah moved to the side of the floor, and someone brought them cups of cool cider. "Tell me about the 3 Bars Ranch," Sarah said, wanting to know more about this man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. "You said you just hired on there?" Cole nodded. "Got in 2 days ago. It is a good outfit, fair wages, and decent accommodations." The owner, John Barrett, he is known for running a tight ship but treating his men well. I plan to work there through the fall and winter, build up my stake, and then maybe look for a place of my own come spring. Your own ranch. That is the dream, Cole said. A small spread, nothing fancy, but enough to run a decent herd and make a living. I have been working toward it for years now, saving every dollar I can. Texas, New Mexico, now Arizona. I have covered a lot of ground learning the business. That must be lonely, Sarah observed. All that traveling, never putting down roots. It can be, Cole admitted. But it is also freedom. I answer to myself, go where the work is good, leave when it is time to move on. There is something to be said for that. And yet you want to settle down eventually. A man needs a place to call home, Cole said. Somewhere to build something lasting, to put down those roots you mentioned. I have seen enough of the territory now to know where I want to be. I just need to work a little longer to make it happen. They talked for another hour, dancing twice more and spending the rest of the time learning about each other. Sarah told Cole about her father's death, about the debts and the struggles of the past months. Cole told her about growing up on his family's ranch in Texas, about learning to rope and ride almost before he could walk, about the hard decision to leave home and make his own way in the world. As the evening wore on, Sarah realized with some surprise that she was genuinely enjoying herself. For the first time in months, she was not worrying about money or rent or where her next meal would come from. She was simply a young woman at a dance with an attractive man who seemed to genuinely enjoy her company. When the musicians finally packed up their instruments and people began drifting toward the door, Cole walked Sarah back to her room above the general store. The streets of Prescott were quieter now, though the saloons still blazed with light and noise. A cool breeze had sprung up, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains surrounding the town. They stopped at the door to the building, and Sarah turned to face Cole. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "For everything. I do not know how I can ever properly express my gratitude." "You do not need to," Cole said. "I am just glad I could help, and I am glad you agreed to come to the dance with me. I had a fine evening." "So did I," Sarah admitted. "I had forgotten what it felt like to simply enjoy myself without worrying about everything else." There was a moment of awkward silence, and Sarah wondered if Cole might try to kiss her. Part of her hoped he would, while another part was terrified at the thought, but Cole simply tipped his hat and took a step back. "I should let you get your rest," he said. "But I hope I will see you again soon, Sarah. Maybe I could call on you sometime." "I would like that," Sarah said, meaning it. "I am usually here most days doing my sewing work. You would be welcome any time." "Then I will make a point of coming by when I am in town," Cole promised. He hesitated, then added, "And Sarah, about that money, do not worry about paying it back right away. Take your time, get yourself on solid ground first. The debt can wait." Before Sarah could respond, he had turned and was walking away down the street, his long strides carrying him quickly toward the boarding house where the 3 Bars Cowboys were staying. Sarah watched until he disappeared around a corner, then climbed the stairs to her room with her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. Over the next several weeks, Cole made good on his promise to visit. He came to town every few days, sometimes on ranch business, sometimes just to see Sarah. They fell into an easy companionship, talking about everything and nothing while Sarah worked on her sewing and Cole sat in the chair by her window. Sarah learned that Cole had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh when she least expected it. She learned that he was well-read despite his rough cowboy exterior, that he had a fondness for poetry and could quote Longfellow and Whitman from memory. She learned that he took his work seriously, but did not take himself too seriously, and that the other cowboys at the 3 Bars respected him not just for his skill with horses and cattle, but for his fairness and integrity. Cole learned that Sarah was tougher than she looked, that beneath her quiet demeanor lay a core of steel forged by loss and hardship. He learned that she had a talent for sketching and would sometimes draw portraits of the people she saw in the street, capturing their essence with just a few pencil strokes. He learned that she sang softly to herself while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, and that the sound of her voice made something in his chest tighten with an emotion he was not quite ready to name. Autumn came to Prescott, bringing cooler temperatures and the gold and red of changing leaves in the mountains. Sarah's financial situation slowly improved. With the pressure of back rent removed, she was able to focus on her work and began to build a small but steady clientele. Several of the ranchers' wives heard about her skilled needlework and began bringing her dresses to alter and mend. She was not prosperous, but she was surviving, and for the first time since her father's death, she could see a path forward. One afternoon in late September, Cole arrived at Sarah's room with an unusual request. "The Three Bars is having a big gathering this weekend," he said. "It is John Barrett's birthday, and his wife is putting together a celebration. All the hands and their families are invited, plus friends from town. I was hoping you might come as my guest." Sarah looked up from the dress she was hemming, surprised and pleased. "You want me to come to your boss's birthday party?" "I do," Cole said. "It will be a full-day affair, food and games and music. Some of the best fiddlers in the territory will be there. I think you would enjoy it, and I know I would enjoy having you there." "I would be honored," Sarah said. "But I should bring something, a gift or food or—" "Just bring yourself," Cole interrupted. "That will be more than enough." The Three Bars Ranch lay 15 miles south of Prescott, nestled in a valley surrounded by pine-covered hills. Cole arrived early on Saturday morning with a wagon and drove Sarah out to the ranch, the two of them talking and laughing as the vehicle bounced along the rough road. The ranch itself was more impressive than Sarah had expected. The main house was a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and a red tile roof. Several barns and outbuildings surrounded a central courtyard, and corrals held dozens of horses. In the distance, Sarah could see cattle dotting the hillsides and cowboys riding the fence lines. "It is beautiful," Sarah said as they pulled up to the house. "John Barrett has done well for himself," Cole agreed. "He came out here 20 years ago with nothing but determination and a good eye for land. Now he runs one of the most successful operations in the territory." The party was already in full swing. Tables had been set up under a grove of cottonwood trees, groaning under the weight of food brought by the ranch hands and guests. Children ran between the trees, playing games and shrieking with laughter. Men gathered in groups to discuss cattle and horses and politics, while women clustered together to share gossip and recipes. Cole introduced Sarah to John and Martha Barrett, a couple in their 50s who greeted her warmly. Martha Barrett was a plump, motherly woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Any friend of Cole's is welcome here," Martha said, taking Sarah's hand. "He is one of our best men, you know, reliable and hardworking. John is already planning to offer him a permanent position come spring." "Is that so?" Sarah said, glancing at Cole, who looked slightly embarrassed. "Martha, you are going to give away all my secrets," Cole said lightly. "Nonsense," Martha replied. "A good man should be praised, especially in front of a pretty girl." She winked at Sarah. "You hang on to this one, dear. The decent ones are few and far between out here." As the day progressed, Sarah found herself truly relaxed for the first time in as long as she could remember. She helped the other women set out food, played games with the children, and spent long stretches simply sitting with Cole under the cottonwoods, watching the festivities and enjoying each other's company. In the late afternoon, the musicians set up and began to play. Couples moved into the clearing that served as a makeshift dance floor, and Cole stood and offered Sarah his hand. "Another dance?" he asked. "I thought you would never ask," Sarah replied with a smile. They danced together as the sun began its descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah was aware of people watching them, smiling knowingly, but she found she did not care. Let them think what they would. For this moment, she was simply happy. As one song ended and another began, Cole pulled Sarah a little closer. "I have been thinking," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "About what?" About you, about us, about the future. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. Cole, I know we have not known each other long, Cole continued. Just a few months, but I have never felt this way about anyone before, Sarah. When I am with you, everything makes sense. When I am not with you, I find myself thinking about you, wondering what you are doing, wishing I could see your smile or hear your laugh. I think about you too, Sarah admitted softly, more than I probably should. There is no should about it, Cole said. What I feel is what I feel, and I am not going to apologize for it or hide it. I care about you, Sarah Mitchell. I care about you deeply, and I want to see where this goes between us. They had stopped dancing now, standing still in the middle of the clearing while other couples swirled around them. Sarah looked up into Cole's eyes and saw the sincerity there, the vulnerability of a man opening his heart. I care about you too, she said. But Cole, I need you to understand something. I have nothing to offer you, no money, no property, no family connections. I am a seamstress who can barely keep a roof over her head. You could do so much better than me. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard, Cole said firmly. You think I care about money or property? Sarah, you are strong and smart and kind. You have survived things that would break most people, and you have done it without losing your decency or your compassion. You are exactly the kind of woman I want in my life, the only kind of woman I want. Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. I do not know what to say. Say you will let me court you properly, Cole said. Say you will give us a chance to see what we might build together. Yes, Sarah whispered. Yes, Cole, I will. Cole's face broke into a wide smile, and before Sarah quite knew what was happening, he had swept her up into his arms and was spinning her around. The other dancers cheered and clapped, and Sarah found herself laughing breathlessly, her arms wrapped around Cole's neck, feeling lighter than air. From that day forward, Cole and Sarah's relationship deepened and grew. Cole came to town whenever he could, and Sarah made the trip out to the 3 bars on Sundays when Cole was not working. They talked about their dreams and their fears, their pasts and their hopes for the future. They went on long walks through the hills around Prescott, Cole teaching Sarah to identify different plants and animal tracks, Sarah sharing stories from books she had read and dreams she had sketched in her journal. As winter approached, bringing cold nights and occasional snow to the high country, Cole began to talk more seriously about his plans for the future. John Barrett had indeed offered him a permanent position as foreman of the 3 bars, a role that would come with better pay and a small house on the ranch property. It was a tempting offer, a chance for security and advancement. But it would mean giving up on my dream of my own place, Cole confided to Sarah one evening as they sat in her room, watching snow fall gently past the window. I would be working for someone else for the rest of my life, no matter how good the job is. What does your heart tell you to do? Sarah asked. Cole was quiet for a long moment. My heart tells me that dreams are important, but so is security, and my heart tells me that whatever I decide, I want you by my side when I do it. Sarah set down her sewing and looked at Cole. What are you saying? Cole moved from his chair to kneel beside Sarah's seat. He took her hands in his calloused thumbs rubbing gentle circles on her palms. I am saying that I love you, Sarah Mitchell. I have loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that window, looking down at me with fire in your eyes even though I could tell you were terrified. I love your strength and your gentleness, your courage and your kindness. I love the way you hum while you work and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Cole, marry me, Cole said simply. I am not asking you to give me an answer right now. I know I should have a ring, should do this properly, but I could not wait another moment to tell you how I feel. Marry me, Sarah. Be my wife, my partner, my companion through whatever life brings us. Help me build that dream I have been chasing. Make a home with me, a life with me, say you will. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but they were tears of joy. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, Cole, I will marry you. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. I never thought I would feel this way about anyone, never thought I would have the chance. But yes, with all my heart, yes. Cole pulled Sarah into his arms and kissed her then, a deep, tender kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. I will get you a proper ring, Cole promised. And we will do this right with a real proposal and— I do not need any of that, Sarah interrupted. I just need you, Cole Hartley. Everything else is just decoration. They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams. Cole would take the foreman position at the 3 bars, but only for 2 years. In that time, they would save every penny they could. Sarah would continue her sewing business, building her clientele among the ranch families and townspeople. At the end of 2 years, they would have enough to buy their own small parcel of land and start their own ranch. It would be hard work, but they would do it together. Cole and Sarah were married in December of 1882 in a simple ceremony at the church in Prescott. Martha Barrett stood up with Sarah, having become like a mother to her in the months since that first party at the 3 bars. Red Murphy served as Cole's best man, with Jack Tillman and Sam Begay in attendance. The whole town seemed to turn out for the wedding, people who had watched Sarah struggle alone and who were genuinely happy to see her find love and security. Leonard Briggs was notably absent, though Sarah learned he had left town the month before under mysterious circumstances. Rumors suggested that John Barrett had had a quiet word with him about his treatment of women in his employ, and that Briggs had decided it might be healthier to conduct his business elsewhere. Sarah was glad to see the last of him. The newlyweds moved into the foreman's house at the 3 bars, a cozy 2-room cabin with a stone fireplace and a porch that looked out over the valley. It was small but clean, and Sarah threw herself into making it a home. She sewed curtains for the windows, braided rugs for the floors, and planted an herb garden outside the door. Cole built her shelves for her books and a larger table where she could do her sewing work. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Cole worked long days managing the ranch hands and overseeing the cattle operations, while Sarah divided her time between keeping house and building her seamstress business. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, Cole reading aloud from the newspaper or a book while Sarah worked on her sewing, both content in each other's company. As the months passed into 1883, Sarah began to notice changes in her body. She was tired more often, feeling queasy in the mornings, and her monthly courses had stopped. She suspected what this meant, but she waited to say anything to Cole until she was certain. In March, Sarah finally told Cole the news. They were sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. "Come September, God willing, you are going to be a father." Cole's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally pure joy. "A baby," he said, his voice hoarse. "Sarah, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation, but yes, Cole, I am carrying our child." Cole pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her as if she were made of spun glass. "This is the best news I have ever received," he said into her hair. "A baby, our baby, I cannot believe it." "Are you happy?" Sarah asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy." Cole pulled back to look at her, and Sarah could see tears glistening in his eyes. "Sarah, I am beyond happy. I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am excited. I am everything all at once. We are going to be parents." They spent the evening talking about names and nurseries, and all the changes a baby would bring. Cole was already planning to add another room to the cabin, a proper nursery where their child could sleep. Sarah was mentally cataloging all the baby clothes she would need to sew, all the blankets and gowns and tiny booties. The news spread quickly through the ranch and into town. Martha Barrett was thrilled, immediately taking Sarah under her wing and offering advice about pregnancy and childbirth. The other ranch wives formed a circle of support, sharing hand-me-down baby clothes and offering their own experiences. As spring turned to summer, Sarah's belly grew round and full. She had to set aside her sewing work in the later months, finding it difficult to sit for long periods. Cole fussed over her constantly, worrying about every twinge and ache, until Sarah finally had to sit him down and explain that pregnancy was not an illness. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she said gently. "I am healthy and strong, and Dr. Mitchell says everything is progressing normally. You need to stop treating me like I might break." "I cannot help it," Cole admitted. "You are carrying our child, Sarah, our child. The thought of anything happening to either of you terrifies me." "Nothing is going to happen," Sarah assured him. "We are going to be fine, both of us, you will see." On a warm evening in September of 1883, Sarah went into labor. Cole immediately sent for the doctor and Martha Barrett, then spent the next several hours pacing the porch like a caged animal, while the women tended to Sarah inside. Red Murphy and some of the other cowboys tried to distract him with cards and whiskey, but Cole could not focus on anything except the sounds coming from the cabin. Labor was long and difficult. Sarah had always known that childbirth was hard, but nothing had quite prepared her for the reality of it. The pain came in waves, each one more intense than the last, until she thought she could not bear another moment. But Martha was there, holding her hand and encouraging her, and the doctor was calm and competent, and somehow Sarah found the strength to keep going. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the eastern hills, Sarah gave one final push and their baby entered the world with a lusty cry. The doctor held up the infant, pink and squalling and absolutely perfect. "You have a son, Miss Sarah," the doctor said with a smile. "A healthy baby boy." Sarah fell back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. A son. She and Cole had a son. Martha cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Sarah's arms. Sarah looked down at the tiny face, at the shock of dark hair and the button nose and the small hands waving in the air, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "He certainly is," Martha agreed. "Now, shall I let that poor man on the porch come in and meet his son? I think he has worn a trench in the wood with all his pacing." Sarah nodded, and Martha went to the door. A moment later, Cole burst into the room, his face pale and his eyes wild. He stopped short when he saw Sarah holding the baby, and his expression transformed into one of awe. "Sarah," he breathed, "are you all right?" "I am fine," Sarah assured him. "Tired but fine. Come meet your son." Cole approached slowly, as if afraid he might startle the baby or somehow do something wrong. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the infant in Sarah's arms. "He is so small," Cole said wonderingly, "and so perfect. Look at his hands, Sarah, his tiny perfect hands." "Would you like to hold him?" Sarah asked. Cole looked terrified at the prospect, but he nodded. Sarah carefully transferred the baby to Cole's arms, showing him how to support the small head. Cole held his son with infinite care, staring down at the tiny face with an expression of complete devotion. "Hello, little one," Cole murmured. "I am your father. I have been waiting to meet you for months now. Your mother and I, we are going to take such good care of you. We are going to love you and protect you and teach you everything we know. You are our son, and you are the most precious thing in the world to us." The baby yawned, a huge yawn for such a small creature, and then settled into sleep in his father's arms. Cole looked up at Sarah with tears running down his face. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you for this gift, for our son, for everything. I love you, Sarah Hartley. I love you more than words can express." "I love you too," Sarah said, reaching out to touch Cole's face. "We did this together, Cole. We made this beautiful little person together." They named their son Thomas Jacob Hartley, Thomas after Sarah's father and Jacob after Cole's. Little Tommy, as they took to calling him, was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had Sarah's green eyes and Cole's dark hair, and as the months passed, his personality began to emerge. He was curious and active, always wanting to see what was happening around him, already reaching for things with his small hands. Cole proved to be a devoted father. He would come in from long days of work and immediately take Tommy from Sarah, talking to the baby about his day, telling him about the horses and cattle and the men who worked the ranch. He made a cradle for Tommy's room, smooth wood that rocked gently, and carved animals to hang above it. He was patient and loving, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with Tommy when the baby was fussy. The 2 years Cole had agreed to work as foreman at the 3 bars passed more quickly than either he or Sarah could have imagined. By the spring of 1885, they had saved nearly $1,500, more than enough to purchase land and get started with their own ranch. Tommy was now a year and a half old, a toddler who was just beginning to walk and talk, filling their days with laughter and wonder. Cole and Sarah spent months looking at available properties, finally settling on a small ranch about 20 miles west of Prescott. It was not much, just 160 acres of grassland with a creek running through it and timber in the surrounding hills, but it was theirs. They purchased the land in March and immediately began making plans. John and Martha Barrett, who had become like family, were sorry to see them go but understanding of their dreams. John helped Cole select the first small herd of cattle, giving him a fair price and throwing in a few extra head as a parting gift. The other ranch hands helped Cole and Sarah move their belongings and build a temporary shelter on the new property. The first year on their own ranch was the hardest of Sarah's life. They lived in a rough cabin that Cole built with his own hands, just 2 rooms with a dirt floor and gaps in the walls that let in the wind and rain. Money was tight, every penny going toward building the herd and improving the property. Sarah planted a vegetable garden and kept chickens, doing everything she could to reduce their expenses. She also continued taking in sewing when she could, though with Tommy to care for and all the work of the ranch, there were few hours left for it. Cole worked from sunrise to sunset, building fences, digging wells, caring for the cattle. He hired help when he absolutely needed it, usually Sam Begay, who had left the 3 bars and was looking for work, but most of the time it was just Cole doing everything himself. He came home each evening exhausted and sunburned, his hands raw with blisters that turned to calluses, but he never complained. This was his dream, their dream, and he would do whatever it took to make it succeed. There were setbacks. A late spring storm killed several calves. The creek ran low during a dry summer, and they had to drive the cattle to water sources miles away. Coyotes and mountain lions took their toll on the herd, but there were also triumphs. The cattle they did raise were healthy and brought good prices at market. The garden produced abundantly, enough that Sarah could preserve vegetables for the winter. Tommy thrived in the outdoors, growing strong and brown from the sun. By the end of their 2nd year on the ranch, things were looking better. Cole had built a proper house, still small but with wooden floors and glass windows and a real stone fireplace. They had expanded their herd to nearly 100 head of cattle. Sam Begay had become a permanent hire, and they had built him his own small cabin on the far side of the property. The ranch even had a name now, the T.J. Ranch, for Thomas Jacob. One evening in the fall of 1887, Sarah and Cole sat on their porch, watching Tommy play in the yard with a stick horse Cole had made for him. Tommy was now 4 years old, full of energy and questions, the light of their lives. "Do you remember that night in Prescott?" Sarah asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "When Leonard Briggs came to collect the rent and I thought my world was ending." "I remember," Cole said, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I remember hearing that man trying to take advantage of you, and I remember thinking I could not let that happen. If you had not stepped in that night, if you had not paid my debt, I do not know what would have become of me," Sarah said softly. "You would have survived," Cole said with certainty. "You are a survivor, Sarah, you always have been, but I am glad I did step in because otherwise I might never have gotten to know you, never have fallen in love with you, never have built this life with you." "And then you asked me to dance," Sarah said, smiling at the memory. "After everything that had happened, you asked me to a dance." "It seemed like the right thing to do," Cole said. You needed something good after such a hard day, and I wanted to spend more time with you. Even then, that first night, I knew there was something special about you." "I knew it about you too," Sarah admitted. "When you looked up at my window and tipped your hat, I felt something I had never felt before. I did not even know your name, but I felt like I knew you somehow, like I had been waiting for you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set and Tommy play. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "I never did pay you back that $60, she said, "the debt I owed to Briggs that you settled." "Sarah, no, let me finish," Sarah interrupted. "I told you I would pay you back, and I never did. Life got busy, we got married, Tommy was born, we started the ranch, but I still owe you that money and I want to make it right." Cole turned to look at her, his expression tender. "You do not owe me anything, Sarah, you never did. That money was not a loan, it was a gift freely given. But I promised. And I am telling you that the promise does not matter," Cole said gently. "Do you want to know the truth? That $60 was the best money I ever spent in my life. Because it brought you into my world, and you have given me more in return than I could ever have imagined. A wife I love more than life itself. A son who makes every day brighter. A home and a dream we are building together. You have repaid me 1,000 times over just by being who you are." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "You always know exactly what to say." "I just speak the truth," Cole said. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We are partners, Sarah, in every sense of the word. What is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine. There is no debt between us, only love and commitment and the life we are creating." Sarah wrapped her arms around her husband, holding him tight, overwhelmed with gratitude for the turn her life had taken. 5 years ago, she had been alone and desperate, facing eviction and poverty with no prospects and no hope. Now she had a husband who adored her, a son who brought her joy every day, and a ranch they were building together with their own hands and determination. "I love you, Cole Hartley," she whispered into his chest. "Thank you for saving me that night. Thank you for asking me to dance. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for saying yes," Cole replied, "to the dance, to the marriage, to all of it. You are my greatest adventure, Sarah, and I cannot wait to see what comes next." The years that followed brought both challenges and rewards. The TJ Ranch slowly grew and prospered. Cole proved to have excellent instincts for ranching, knowing when to buy and when to sell, how to manage the land for maximum productivity. Sarah's skills as a seamstress continued to be in demand, and she eventually trained several young women in the area, creating a small cooperative of needleworkers who could handle larger orders. In the spring of 1889, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than her first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was healthier and less stressed than she had been carrying Tommy. In December, she gave birth to a daughter, Emma Rose Hartley, a tiny girl with wisps of red-gold hair and her mother's green eyes. Tommy was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from changing diapers to singing lullabies. Cole, who had been a devoted father to his son, was absolutely besotted with his daughter. He would hold Emma for hours, rocking her and talking to her, telling her about the ranch and the horses, and all the things he would teach her when she was older. "You are going to spoil that girl," Sarah teased one evening, watching Cole cradle Emma while she slept. "That is a father's prerogative," Cole replied without apology. "She is my daughter. I am allowed to spoil her." As Tommy and Emma grew, they became true children of the ranch. Tommy learned to ride almost as soon as he could walk, and by the time he was 7, he was helping his father with the cattle. Emma was more interested in the animals themselves than the work, spending hours in the barn playing with the barn cats or feeding treats to the horses. The ranch continued to expand. By 1892, they were running nearly 300 head of cattle and had added horses to their operation, breeding and training mounts that became known throughout the territory for their quality and temperament. They had built a proper barn, a bunkhouse for the 3 hired hands they now employed, and had expanded the main house to include 4 bedrooms and a real parlor. Sarah's cooperative of seamstresses had become a legitimate business, taking orders from as far away as Tucson and Flagstaff. They specialized in wedding dresses and formal wear, and Sarah had gained a reputation for her exquisite embroidery and fine detail work. The income from the sewing business allowed them to put money aside for Tommy's and Emma's education and future. In 1895, Arizona was still a territory, but talk of statehood was growing. Cole and Sarah attended town meetings and political rallies, adding their voices to those calling for Arizona to be admitted to the Union. They had built something here, a life and a legacy, and they wanted to see the territory they loved recognized as a full state. One warm evening in May of that year, the family gathered on the porch after supper. Tommy, now 12 years old and shooting up tall like his father, was carving a piece of wood with the knife Cole had given him for his birthday. Emma, 5 years old and full of chatter, was playing with a doll Sarah had made for her. Cole and Sarah sat together in the rocking chairs Cole had built, watching their children and the sun setting over their land. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Emma asked suddenly. She had heard the story many times, how her father had saved her mother from a cruel landlord and then asked her to dance, and she never tired of hearing it again. "I think about it often," Sarah said, smiling at her daughter. "It was one of the most important nights of my life." "Tell the story again," Emma pleaded. "Please?" "You have heard it 100 times," Tommy said, but even he looked interested. The story of how their parents met had taken on an almost mythical quality in their family lore. "Your mother was in trouble," Cole began, falling easily into the familiar narrative. "She owed money she did not have, and a bad man was trying to take advantage of her. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I was able to help." "You were her hero," Emma said, her eyes shining. "I would not go that far," Cole said. "I just did what any decent person should do." "But then you asked Mama to dance," Emma prompted. "That was the most romantic part." "I wanted to spend time with her," Cole admitted. "Even though we had just met, I felt drawn to her. So I asked her to go to a dance with me, and she said yes." "And then you fell in love," Emma said with satisfaction, "and got married and had me and Tommy and lived happily ever after." "That is the general idea," Sarah agreed, laughing. "Though real life is a bit more complicated than the fairy tales make it seem." "But you are happy, right?" Emma asked seriously. "You and Papa, you are glad you got married." "More glad than I can possibly express," Sarah said, reaching over to take Cole's hand. "Your father is the best thing that ever happened to me." "And your mother is the best thing that ever happened to me," Cole added. "Well, your mother and you two rascals, you are all the best things." Tommy made a face at being called a rascal, but he was smiling. "Are you going to tell us how Mama repaid the debt Papa paid for her?" he asked. "That part of the story always confuses me." Cole and Sarah exchanged a glance. They had explained this to the children before, but it was a concept that seemed to puzzle them. "The truth is, I never did repay your father," Sarah said. "Not in money anyway. He told me the debt was forgiven, that it was a gift and not a loan." "But you always say we should pay our debts," Tommy pointed out, "that it is a matter of honor." "That is true," Cole said. "But sometimes, between people who love each other, the accounting is different. Your mother has given me far more than $60 worth of value over the years. She has given me herself, her love, her partnership, her children. How do you put a price on that? You cannot. So the debt is not measured in money but in the life we have built together." "That is confusing," Emma said, wrinkling her nose. "It is a grown-up concept," Sarah agreed. "But someday, when you are older and perhaps in love yourselves, you will understand. Love is not about keeping score or tracking debts. It is about giving freely and receiving gratefully, about building something together that is bigger than either person alone." The children seemed to accept this, even if they did not fully understand it, and the conversation moved on to other topics. Later, after the children had been sent to bed, Cole and Sarah remained on the porch enjoying the cool evening air. They are growing up so fast, Sarah observed. Tommy will be a man soon and Emma is not far behind. They are good children, Cole said. We have been blessed. We have, Sarah agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Do you ever regret it, leaving the 3 bars, taking the risk of starting our own place? We could have had an easier life if you had stayed on as foreman. Easier, maybe, Cole said, but not better. This ranch, this life we have built, it is ours, Sarah. We made it with our own hands and our own sweat and determination. That means something. And I could never regret the choices that brought us here. Even the hard times, Sarah pressed. That first year when we had almost nothing and worked ourselves to exhaustion. Even the hard times, Cole confirmed, because we faced them together and we came through stronger for it. That is what marriage is, Sarah. It is not just the good times and the romantic moments. It is working side by side through the difficulties, supporting each other when things are tough, celebrating together when things go well. You are a wise man, Cole Hartley, Sarah said softly. I am a man who got very lucky 13 years ago, Cole corrected. Lucky that I happened to be walking down that street in Prescott at exactly the right moment. Lucky that I had the courage to step in when I saw someone in need. Lucky that you agreed to dance with me, and then lucky beyond measure that you agreed to marry me. Everything good in my life came from that one moment of decision. Sarah stood and moved to sit in Cole's lap, something she had not done in years. Cole adjusted to accommodate her, his arms coming around her waist. Everything good in my life came from that moment too, she said. You saved me, Cole, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me love and security and a family and a home. You gave me a future when I thought I had none. I hope you know how grateful I am every single day. You have thanked me enough, Cole said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Now let us just enjoy what we have built together. They sat there for a long time, holding each other and watching the stars come out one by one over their ranch, over their home, over the life they had created from that single act of kindness and courage 13 years before. The turn of the century brought changes to Arizona territory and to the Hartley family. Tommy, now 17, was talking about going to college back east, wanting to study agriculture and business so he could eventually take over the management of the ranch. Emma, 12 years old, had developed a passion for horses and was proving to be a talented rider and trainer. The ranch was more successful than Cole and Sarah had ever dreamed, employing 8 full-time hands and running over 500 head of cattle along with a breeding program for horses that was drawing buyers from 3 territories. In 1902, Sarah received word that her old landlord, Leonard Briggs, had died in California, alone and penniless. She felt no satisfaction at the news, only a kind of sad relief that a difficult chapter of her life was fully closed. She and Cole attended a memorial service in Prescott, more out of respect for the community than for the man himself, and afterward walked through the town that had been the setting for the beginning of their love story. The town had grown and changed in 20 years. Electric lights were beginning to replace gas lamps in some areas. Automobiles occasionally appeared on the streets, though horses were still far more common. The building where Sarah had rented her small room was gone, torn down to make way for a new bank. But the community hall where Cole had first asked her to dance was still there, and on an impulse, they went inside. The hall was empty, quiet in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Sarah walked to the center of the floor where they had danced that first night and turned to face Cole. "Dance with me," she said, holding out her hand. "There is no music," Cole pointed out, but he was already moving toward her. "We do not need music," Sarah said. "We never really did." Cole took her hand and pulled her into his arms, and they began to move across the floor in a slow waltz, turning and swaying to a melody only they could hear. They were both older now, Sarah with silver threading through her auburn hair and Cole with lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But in that moment, they were 23 and 30 again, a desperate young woman and a kind cowboy taking a chance on each other. "Thank you for asking me to dance that night," Sarah said as they moved together. "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible, for helping me when I had no right to expect it, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable." "Thank you for saying yes," Cole replied. "To the dance, to the courtship, to the marriage, to all of it. You are my partner in every sense, Sarah. My lover, my friend, my companion in this grand adventure of life. I could not have asked for a better person to share it with." They danced until the sun began to set, until the caretaker of the hall came to lock up and found them there, swaying together in the golden light. The old man smiled and left them alone for a few more minutes, recognizing something sacred in what he was witnessing. Finally, Cole and Sarah left the hall and walked back to where they had left their wagon. As they drove out of Prescott toward home, Sarah leaned against Cole's shoulder and thought about the improbable series of events that had brought them to this point. If Briggs had not come to collect the rent that day, if Cole had not been walking down that street at that exact moment, if he had not had the courage and the compassion to step in, if he had not asked her to dance, so many small decisions and chances, all leading to the life they now shared. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, feeling Sarah nestle closer. "I am thinking about fate," Sarah said, "about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things, about how a single act of kindness can change everything." "It was not just my kindness," Cole said. "It was your strength, your willingness to take a chance on a stranger, your courage to build something new. We did this together, Sarah, always together." "Always together," Sarah echoed, and it sounded like a promise, a vow they had been renewing every day for the past 20 years and would continue to renew for whatever time they had left. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all years do. Tommy went off to college in 1903, returning with a degree in agricultural science and new ideas for improving the ranch. He married a young woman from Flagstaff in 1908, a schoolteacher named Margaret who fit seamlessly into the Hartley family. Emma, meanwhile, had become one of the most sought-after horse trainers in Arizona. And in 1909, she married a veterinarian who came to the ranch to treat a sick mare and stayed because he had fallen head over heels in love with the spirited young woman who handled horses like they were her own children. Cole and Sarah became grandparents in 1909 when Tommy and Margaret welcomed a daughter, Grace. More grandchildren followed, 2 more from Tommy and Margaret, and eventually 3 from Emma and her husband. The ranch house was expanded again to accommodate the growing family, and Sunday dinners became loud, chaotic affairs with multiple generations gathered around the big table Cole had built. In 1912, Arizona finally achieved statehood, becoming the 48th state admitted to the Union. Cole and Sarah attended the celebration in Phoenix, proud to witness this milestone for the land they had helped settle and develop. They were in their 50s now, still active and involved in the ranch, but beginning to turn over more of the day-to-day operations to Tommy and Emma. On a warm September evening in 1913, exactly 30 years after the birth of their son Tommy, Cole and Sarah sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the land they had built. Grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The smell of dinner cooking drifted out from the kitchen where Margaret and Emma were preparing the evening meal. 30 years, Sarah said, shaking her head in wonder. 30 years since Tommy was born, 31 since we met. Where did the time go, Cole? Into good things, Cole replied. Into children and grandchildren, into this ranch, into the life we built together. I would not change a moment of it. Not even the hard times? Sarah asked, echoing a conversation they had had many times over the years. Especially not the hard times, Cole said firmly. Because those times showed us what we were made of, showed us that we could face anything as long as we faced it together. Sarah took Cole's hand, her fingers lacing through his in a gesture as familiar as breathing. Do you remember what you said to me that first night when you asked me to dance? I said a lot of things that night, Cole said with a smile. "Which particular comment are you referring to?" "You said that after such an unpleasant evening I might enjoy an hour or two of music and company," Sarah said. "You gave me exactly what I needed in that moment, Cole. Not just the money to pay my debt, though that was certainly important, but you gave me hope. You gave me a reason to believe that good things could still happen, that there were still kind people in the world. You gave me yourself. And you gave me purpose," Cole replied. "I had been drifting for years, working ranch to ranch, saving money for a dream that never quite seemed real. But when I met you, suddenly everything came into focus. You were the missing piece, Sarah, the reason for all of it. The dream was not just about having my own ranch. It was about having someone to share it with, someone to build a life with. It was about you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching their family. Tommy emerged from the barn, having finished the evening chores, and waved to his parents before heading inside to wash up for dinner. Emma called to her children, herding them toward the house with the ease of long practice. The grandchildren ran past the porch, shouting and laughing, full of energy and life. "We did well," Sarah said softly. "Look at all of this, Cole. Look at what came from that one night, from your kindness and my desperation, and the courage we both showed in taking a chance on each other. All of these people, this family, this legacy, it all started with you asking me to dance." "It started with you saying yes," Cole corrected. "You could have refused. You could have been too proud to accept my help, too independent to let a stranger pay your debt. But you said yes to the help, and yes to the dance, and yes to every step that came after. Your yes was just as important as my asking. Then we are equally responsible for all of this," Sarah said, gesturing to encompass the ranch, the family, the life they had created. "Equally responsible and equally blessed," Cole agreed. He stood and offered Sarah his hand, pulling her to her feet. "Dance with me." "Again?" Sarah asked, laughing. "Cole, we are too old to be dancing on the porch without music." "We are never too old," Cole said firmly. "And we have never needed music, just each other." So they danced, there on the porch of their ranch house, while their family moved around inside preparing dinner and their grandchildren played in the yard. They danced as the sun set and the first stars appeared, as they had danced 31 years before in a community hall in Prescott, as they had danced countless times since. They danced with the ease of long practice and the comfort of deep love, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and had built something beautiful together. When they finally stopped, both slightly breathless and smiling, Cole pulled Sarah close and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Sarah Hartley," he said, as he had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times more. "Thank you for that dance all those years ago. Thank you for every dance since. Thank you for this life." "I love you too, Cole Hartley," Sarah replied, her heart full to bursting. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for asking me to dance when all I could see was darkness ahead. You brought light into my life, and it has never dimmed." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms as the evening deepened into night. Inside, their family was waiting, but for this moment, it was just the two of them, just as it had been in the beginning. A cowboy and a seamstress, a desperate woman and a kind stranger, two people who had taken a chance on each other and had found something more precious than gold. The years continued to bring changes. Cole and Sarah eventually turned over complete control of the ranch to Tommy, though they remained active and involved, offering advice and help when needed. They traveled some, visiting Emma and her family when they moved to California, taking a trip back to Texas so Cole could show Sarah where he had grown up. But they always came back to the ranch, to the home they had built, because that was where their hearts were. In 1925, Cole suffered a heart attack while working in the barn. He survived, but the doctor warned him to slow down, to take things easier. Sarah, terrified of losing him, enforced the doctor's orders strictly, much to Cole's grumbling frustration. But even in his reduced capacity, Cole found ways to be useful. working with the grandchildren to teach them about ranching, sitting on the porch to oversee operations, offering his years of experience and wisdom to guide the next generation. Sarah, for her part, finally gave up the seamstress business when her eyesight began to fail in her late 60s. But she found new purpose in writing down the family history, recording all the stories and memories so that future generations would know where they came from. She wrote about her father, about the hard months after his death, about that fateful night when a cowboy paid her debt and asked her to dance. She wrote about the early years of the ranch, about the children and grandchildren, about the love that had sustained her through everything. On a crisp October morning in 1932, exactly 50 years after they had met, Cole and Sarah celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. The ranch was filled with family, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now, all gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. There was food and music and laughter, and at one point, someone called for Cole and Sarah to dance. They were both in their 70s now, moving more slowly than they once had, but they still had the grace and connection of a lifetime spent together. The family formed a circle around them as the fiddle player struck up a waltz, and Cole took Sarah in his arms one more time. 50 years, Sarah said, looking up at her husband with eyes that were dimmed with age but still bright with love. Can you believe it, Cole? 50 years since you asked me to dance. 50 years since you said yes, Cole replied. And I would do it all again, every moment, every challenge, every joy. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah, then, now, and always. They danced slowly, carefully, supported by each other and by the love that had carried them through 5 decades. Around them, their family watched with tears in their eyes, understanding that they were witnessing something rare and precious. This was what love looked like, not the passionate flush of new romance, but the deep, abiding commitment of 2 people who had chosen each other every day for 50 years. When the dance ended, the family applauded, and Cole and Sarah bowed to each other with exaggerated formality, making everyone laugh. Then they were surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all wanting to hug them and congratulate them and hear, once more, the story of how it all began. Cole and Sarah told the story together, trading off lines they had repeated so many times they had become ritual. They told about the debt and the desperate situation, about the cowboy who stepped in with kindness and the invitation to a dance. They told about falling in love and building a ranch and raising a family. They told about hard times and good times, about challenges overcome and dreams fulfilled. And when the story was done, Tommy raised his glass and proposed a toast. To Cole and Sarah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. To the love that built all of this, that created this family and this legacy, may we all be so fortunate as to find what you found in each other. To Cole and Sarah, the family echoed, glasses raised high. Cole and Sarah stood together, hands clasped, looking out at the family they had created, the legacy they were leaving behind. It had all started with a debt she could not pay and a cowboy who helped without expecting anything in return. It had all started with an invitation to dance and the courage to say yes. And from those simple beginnings, they had built something extraordinary. Cole Hartley passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1935, just shy of his 85th birthday. He died as he had lived, with dignity and grace, surrounded by the family he loved. Sarah held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering all the things she had told him 1,000 times before, that she loved him, that she was grateful for him, that he had been her salvation and her joy. The funeral was held at the ranch, and it seemed like half of Arizona attended. Cowboys and ranchers, businessmen and families, old friends and new, all came to pay their respects to a man who had lived his life with integrity and kindness. Sarah stood dry-eyed through most of it, her grief too deep for tears, held upright by her children and sustained by the memories of 53 years of love. After Cole's death, Sarah moved into the main house with Tommy and Margaret. She was 80 years old now, frail but still sharp-minded, still with stories to tell and wisdom to share. She spent her days sitting on the porch, watching the ranch operations continue, seeing the legacy she and Cole had built carried forward by their children and grandchildren. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the family had retired for the night, Sarah would sometimes go out to the porch alone. She would sit in one of the rocking chairs Cole had built all those years ago, and she would rock gently, remembering. She remembered the young woman she had been, desperate and afraid, facing eviction with nowhere to turn. She remembered the tall cowboy who had stepped in to help, asking nothing in return but a dance. She remembered falling in love, building a home, raising children, creating a life beyond her wildest dreams. And sometimes, on those quiet evenings, Sarah would stand and begin to sway, moving to music only she could hear. In her mind, she was 23 again, and Cole was 30, and they were dancing in a community hall in Prescott with their whole lives ahead of them. In her mind, his arms were around her, his voice was whispering in her ear, telling her he loved her, that she was his greatest adventure. "Thank you for the dance, Cole," Sarah would whisper to the night sky. "Thank you for every dance, thank you for everything." Sarah Mitchell Hartley passed away on a warm summer evening in 1938, surrounded by her family. She was 83 years old, and she died with a smile on her face, her last words a whispered yes to a question only she could hear. They buried her next to Cole on the hilltop overlooking the ranch, under a sky blazing with stars and the endless Arizona horizon stretching in every direction. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story but never forgetting the foundation. The tale of how it all began became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The story of a debt that could not be paid, a cowboy who helped without expecting anything in return, and an invitation to dance that changed two lives forever. And if you visit the TJ Ranch today, now run by the great-great-grandchildren of Cole and Sarah Hartley, you will find a small memorial on that hilltop. Two headstones side by side, marked simply with names and dates. And between them, carved into a third stone, are words that sum up everything that came from that night in Prescott in 1882. He asked her to dance. She said yes, and everything beautiful followed. It was a love story born from desperation and kindness, built on courage and commitment, sustained by partnership and devotion. It was a love that created a family, a legacy, a testament to the power of compassion and the magic that can happen when two people take a chance on each other. It was, in the end, a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West and lasting far beyond the time and place of its beginning. And it all started with a debt, a cowboy, and an invitation to dance.